Good morning. So, it's hump day, right? I want to talk about fear. Um, you have to look at what it's all about, obviously. Um, Probably its roots are protection. Um, as cavemen, we had to be fearful of our environment. We had to always be cautious, and so fear protected us, right? And I think that even today, fear not only can protect us, but it can be instructional as well. Um, what does fear do? Fear helps us be prepared for eventualities, for things that may happen, but not necessarily will happen. Okay, so if you're starting on an endeavor, um, you can imagine all of the different things that um, that could obstruct the success of your new project, whatever it happens to be. And through that, you can kind of extrapolate, okay, so if this happens, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to overcome it? Is there a way to prevent it? Right? Um, but a lot of times, what happens is we get stuck in it. You know, so fearful about doing anything that we're frozen. And the tiger's racing at us, and I can't outrun it. If I make a sudden move, it knows where I am. It's going to pounce on me. That kind of thing. So you stay frozen where you are and get eaten. Right? Um, Instead, perhaps now, obviously, in a scenario like that, you may not be quick thinking enough to find a rock to throw at it or whatever. But you see what I'm saying? We can use our fears to overcome scenarios that may happen, eventualities that might come about. Especially once you get a business going, you need to think about, okay, so what happens if tomorrow I can no longer send emails? And I've heard of that happening to very successful companies where the ISP has said, hey, because you've got so many rejections, we're going to shut you down. You're not going to be able to send email anymore. Oh my God, you know, that's my whole livelihood kind of thing. Um, you have to be considerate of all of the things that happen. So you have to have an expression of fear so that you can be pre-warned or pre-prepared for what might happen to you. Okay. Um, and I was watching a TED Talk this morning, a fellow by the name of Jai Jang, who um, who did a project called 100 Days of Fears. In in Because of his history, he was afraid of um, rejection, and so what he did was he said, okay, so I'm going to experience rejection. I'm going to do it deliberately. On the first day, what he did was he said, okay, so I'm going to ask somebody random that I don't know for $100. You know, and so he said, when I did that, it was like I was sweating, I was nervous, my hair was standing up. It's like, can I borrow $100 from you? And the guy looked at me, why? And oh, never mind. Well, first of all, the guy said no, and then why? And Jai Jang says, oh, okay, and he just ran away. And in observing what happened, what he did with the rejection was to run away. He determined that, okay, so that wasn't productive. but the guy asked why. Hi, Denise, how are you? The guy asked why, and so that brought the idea up to him. Okay, so maybe if I had an answer, maybe if I had an explanation for why I needed $100, that guy might have given me $100. You never know. You know, you have to pursue that. And then, he goes on to explain different things that he went into a Starbucks and asked the manager, "Good morning, Betty, how are you?" Went into a Starbucks and asked the manager, "Can I be a Starbucks greeter?" And the manager said, "What's a Starbucks greeter?" And he said, "Well, it's kind of like a Walmart greeter. It's in Starbucks." And and Jai Jang says, "Well, in hindsight, that was probably not a good analogy because who would want to be associated with, a Walmart greeter anyway?" So, he talked the manager into being a Starbucks greeter for an hour. And so, what he said was what he learned from coming up against his fears and, seeking rejection, basically. He would do things that he knew initially people would reject. Like, he said, I went up to some guy's house, just knocked on his door, it's a random house, and the guy comes to the door and he says, "Can I plant this flower in your backyard?" you know, and the guy said, "No." And then, and then Jai Dangus asked him, why? Why wouldn't you let me do that? And the guy said, "Well, because I have a dog and he would just dig it up and it would destroy your flower. So it would be a waste of your time and your flower." Oh, so you see, the rejection was more about the consequences. The guy was actually wanting to help Jai Jang. And he said, "But I tell you what, my neighbor across the street, she loves flowers. Go and ask her." So Jang went across the street and asked her, and she, "Yes, great, good," and it was a whole different experience. But, the idea is, the point I'm trying to make is, we have all these fears based on what we think are the results or could be the results. That's not necessarily the case. And so, I'm just running a story here that I heard about the incident where a whaling ship was rammed by a whale, poked a hole in the side of the ship, and the sailors were 1,000 miles from any point, and here they were in three little dinghies, three whaling boats, trying to decide, how to survive, how to get to land. And they mapped out different scenarios. They could go to the closest island, which was 1,000 miles away, but they had heard that there were cannibals on that island. And so they rejected that idea out of their fear that was based on nothing but propaganda. And they decided to go a different route, 1,500 miles, which resulted in the death of most of them, all except for two. Whereas had they gone to Tahiti, they might have found a wonderful island, and maybe many more of them would have survived. So, getting back to my original point, is our fears are based on our assumptions that are based on historical, possibly non-fact, just stories that we've heard or things that we've made up. A lot of us have vivid imaginations, and it's like, oh, so, if I do this, what catastrophic thing might happen to me? whereas that may not necessarily be founded on actual truth. So you have to examine where your fears come from and think of them just as a story that you tell yourself that may not necessarily be the truth. And it's also instructive in, okay, so if I go and knock on somebody's door and ask them to, if I can plant this flower, what might their responses be? They might say, no, get the hell out of here. They might say just flat out no. And if I ask them, why not? Come from their perspective. It's like, yeah, I know this sounds absolutely ridiculous, but why wouldn't you let me do it? And so now all of a sudden you're on their side. You understand what they're thinking. Yeah, this is stupid. I don't know you from anybody. You want to plant a flower for me? But you get into their psyche, and maybe their reasoning for not letting you do that is something completely different from what you might imagine. So what do you do? It's like, do you do things that are silly and learn to face rejection? That might be helpful, because then it's like what's the program, Toastmasters. You have this fear of standing up in front of people and talking in front of people. Well, what they get you to do is stand up and talk in front of people to overcome that fear. If you have a fear of rejection, do something that's, way out in left field. That's my right, sorry, left field. Knowing that there is going to be this immediate rejection, but you also are prepared for that rejection, and you go, okay, so, I understand where you're coming from, but what about this? And so that helps you to get comfortable with the fear of rejection, so that you can step out of your boundaries. You can, it's like, you can become more than you thought you were, or thought you had the wherewithal to be. Anyway, just some food for thought. We all have fears, and I think that each and every one of us fears rejection, for sure. But if we prepare ourselves for the rejection, like, okay, so I'm going to ask people to to do life coaching. My fear is that they're going to say no. And if I get down to, why would you say no when I'm inviting to help you become better? If I get on their side and try and understand why it is that they might initially say no, obviously there will be certain things, but everyone wants to be better, wants to be, have somebody help them be better. Otherwise, we wouldn't go to the doctor. We just, oh, I can overcome this illness. It's a broken leg. I'll just, patch myself up. There is something that, whatever it is that you do, if it should be a service. It should be a service to other people. And so if you look at it from their perspective, why would they say no? They say no because they don't trust you. In order to get their trust, be on their side. Come from where they're coming from. Understand what their fear is. I don't know you. You might lead me astray. You might have some weird idea about how I'm going to, if you pour this boiling oil on me, that'll make me better. Well, and then throw some feathers at me. get into their psyche, get into extrapolate the fear, and how would you overcome it? Now you can deal with it, and it becomes less of an issue. Now it's just you stepping out, taking a breath, and saying, okay, I might get rejected, and that's okay. Chances are, when you're selling, if you've created whatever product you create, not everybody is going to buy that product. There will be rejections. People will see the product and they'll go, I don't need that. I don't want it. Whatever, for whatever reason. And maybe not everybody needs your product. So there will be rejection. It's okay. Go on to the next person. Sales is a numbers game, right? Anyways, if you have something to offer and it's valuable, get into the mind of the people that you're offering to overcome their rejections before they become a rejection, or understand how to deal with them. That'll make you more comfortable about asking them to use your services. Okay, so I'm gonna let you go. Wednesday. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 7:15. You guys have a wonderful day.